Thank you for your interest in our program. If you enjoy it, please do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. It helps us grow and expand our reach. Thank you again and enjoy the program.
Good afternoon. My name is Barry Bishop, Vice President of Virginians for High Speed Rail. Welcome to our virtual town hall meeting, Expanding Rail Across North Carolina and the Southeast. I'm pleased to report that we have over 270 participants registered for today's meeting. The purpose of our virtual town hall series is to give Virginians an opportunity to hear from and engage with leading transportation decision makers. If you have questions for our speaker today, please send them at any time to our Executive Director, Danny Plugger, via the chat box. We'll get to as many of them as time allows. Today's program will be posted on YouTube next week, and we encourage you to share it with your associates. Our Town Hall series is made possible at no cost to participants through the generous support of our sponsors, Siemens, JBG Smith, and WSP. We thank them all for their support. Virginians for High Speed Rail was founded in the 1990s by leaders in Richmond and Hampton Roads to build grassroots support for the Southeast High Speed Rail corridor connecting Washington to Virginia, North Carolina, and Point South. One of our biggest legislative victories in the early days was leading the successful effort for the creation of the Virginia-North Carolina Interstate High Speed Rail Compact, which was the first congressionally approved multi-state passenger rail-focused compact. Over the last 28 years, we've advocated for the expansion of fast, frequent, and reliable passenger rail service for Virginians. I think it's fair to say that over the last decade, there has really been a rail renaissance in Virginia and elsewhere. That renaissance was interrupted, however, with COVID, and the world changed, as you know. Ridership plummeted as Americans stayed home. However, I'm excited to report that in Virginia, we ended fiscal year 2021 with ridership at about 59% of pre-pandemic ridership. More importantly, for the fiscal year 2022, October through July, our Amtrak regionals are at 88% of their year-over-year pre-pandemic ridership. July was the highest ridership month ever for Virginians' regional trains. Meanwhile, our partners in North Carolina are also seeing a similar rebound. They ended fiscal year 2021 with ridership at about 53% of pre-pandemic ridership, and their Carolinian and Piedmont services are at 99% of year-over-year pre-pandemic ridership for fiscal year 2022. Between the Transforming Rail program in Virginia, which has moved over 400 miles of railroad right-of-way into the public domain, the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is investing nearly $70 billion into our nation's rail network, and the recent federal grant to advance the engineering on the Virginia-North Carolina S-Line, the future is bright for rail in the Southeast. That brings us to today's speaker, Jason Orthner, Director of the Rail Division for the North Carolina Department of Transportation. In his capacity as Rail Division Director, Jason is responsible for leading statewide rail initiatives, including safety, planning and engineering, construction, and freight and passenger programs. He serves on several national rail committees, including the State Amtrak Intercity Passenger Rail Committee Executive Team, the Next Generation Equipment Committee, and the American Railway Engineering and Maintenance of Way Committee 11, Intercity and Commuter Rail. Mr. Orthner holds a degree in civil engineering from North Carolina State University, is a registered professional engineer, and a certified public manager. Jason, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Barry, and really appreciate the opportunity to join this conversation hosted by Virginians for High Speed Rail. Really appreciate your organization and what you do in educating the wider industry on initiatives and issues, not just in Virginia, but in in the Southeast as well. So appreciate that very much. Happy to talk about some of our initiatives around expanding passenger rail today. It is like Barry just mentioned, it feels like a renaissance in many ways, fueled by obviously federal funding at new levels we've never seen before. So that is a large part, I think, a background to the conversation, but I'll get right into it with my presentation. So I always like to begin with our mission statement here at NCDOT Rail Division. Much of what we do is basically predicated and founded on this statement that we are about the safe and efficient movement of people and goods on North Carolina's railroads through freight passenger safety programs supporting job creation and economic growth. We really are a multifaceted rail program. We don't put our feet in any particular one of those areas of freight passenger safety. We have initiatives in all three that are critically important. And we value our partnerships with our railroad partners, industry partners, and community partners very, very highly as we advance North Carolina's initiatives in the rail space. There are over 3,400 miles of active railroad in North Carolina. And we have a very rich asset in this network, obviously mostly almost entirely privately held, but it really represents a significant opportunity to advance transportation of goods and people throughout our state, and also to connect the Southeast, both now and in the future. A couple notable things about our network: we have two Class 1 CSX and Norfolk Southern, both of which operate their primary north-south main lines through our state. We also have the North Carolina Railroad Company corridor, which extends 317 miles from Charlotte over to the coast at Morehead City, which is a real economic engine for our state as well, a very strategically placed rail corridor. And they hold a lease with Norfolk Southern for the operation of that asset. There are over 24 short lines in our state that we have very strong relationships with through our programs. And we also own about 109 miles of rail corridors that have been rail banked or back in service as operated short lines. A little bit about passenger rail service in our state. We currently have a fairly robust program, as Barry mentioned here in his remarks at the beginning, with high frequency service between Raleigh and Charlotte over the North Carolina Railroad Corridor. Amtrak operates multiple long distance services in our state, and we have a very successful interstate route that we support between Charlotte and New York, the Carolinian, which was one of the best performing routes during the pandemic. Week over week, we saw good numbers on that train, even while ridership on other services was down. Our current ridership levels are exceeding 2019, our pre-pandemic levels. As Barry mentioned, we're at nearly 100% of the pre-pandemic ridership. But the current months are seeing ridership levels way in excess of even the 2019 levels on a month-over-month basis. So we're in a really good position, I think, for rail generally in our state, and I think perhaps around the region in the country. With that strong support, we'll be starting a fourth Piedmont round trip, which is allowed by our agreements with Norfolk Southern, NCR, and Amtrak next year. We are also another major element of our program is the Charlotte Gateway Station, which should be online by 2026 as the premier station for that large city in our state, one of the highest ridership stations in the Southeast.
Jason, if there's a presentation, we can't see it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Barry or Danny?
This is Danny.
Oh, Danny. I'm sorry. Let me see what we can do here to fix that.
If you want to try to reshare your screen.
Okay. Danny, is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Very good. I apologize. Let me go back just one screen just so folks can just see the map I was referring to.
And it says give subtitles a try. I don't know if that box is blocking the screen.
Okay. Let's see what we can do to fix that too. I apologize for the technical difficulty here. Danny, does that fix that?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I think we're back in business. Okay. Well, sorry for all of our attendees to have to go through that technical difficulty, but this is the screen I was sharing before of our various services and the initiatives going forward. Moving right along into, wanted to just discuss a program we recently completed. The Piedmont Improvement Program it was our major ERA funded project with a grant awarded in 2009. Under that program, it was a program fully managed by NCDOT, over $500 million in improvements, and it was completed in 2017 on time and on budget. It really set the stage for the higher frequency operation that we have today between Raleigh and Charlotte. We fully double tracked the corridor between Greensboro and Charlotte, added over 5 miles of passing signs between Greensboro and Raleigh. Closed more than 40 at-grade crossings. We really designed the system to be fluid for all trains, freight, and passenger, and it allowed our 3rd and 4th Piedmont round trip and a pathway to the 5th round trip as well. Real quick on Charlotte Gateway Station, our department led that project phase 1 as well, with the platforms and tracks and other bridges and other facilities. At that site. That work is complete, and we are now working with the city and their developer on a phase 2 that will include commercial, retail, residential, and direct access to entertainment in the business district downtown. If anybody has been to Charlotte, you'll know that the station that is in an awkward place for such a large city with so much opportunity. And this is sort of an indication of what the street side of that facility will look like when it's completed, a multi-story structure with the station incorporated. Now, what I really wanted to talk about is unlocking passenger rail as a way to really move people in our state. We're getting interest from localities all around our state in passenger rail being a part of their mobility solution. Passenger rail, what it does really well is connect the center of urban and rural communities so that folks can travel without the need of a vehicle between those communities, step off onto other forms of transit, including walking, biking, rideshare, and the like. We know that folks are leaning into this just by the ridership numbers that we're seeing, and the communities are seeing it as an amenity. And so this map basically represents what we're seeing as far as interest across the state in expanding beyond just our core service between Raleigh, Charlotte, and the connecting very basic connection services out of state into something that's more of a robust network. Notable on this map is Asheville, a connection from Asheville to Salisbury within the network, and Raleigh to Wilmington. As mentioned before, the extension of the core network from Charlotte south towards Atlanta. And real importantly, what really makes all this possible is extending the network from Raleigh north over a high capacity, high speed connection into Virginia and the Northeast. A little bit about our partners. We value our relationships tremendously in this space, in the industry. And so we have long-standing and very strong relationships with our partners in Virginia, both the VPRA, the VDOT, as well as VDRPT, Amtrak, the North Carolina Railroad Company here in our state, the FRA, CSX, and Norfolk Southern. All are critical to advancing our initiatives, both freight, safety, and passenger. Many know that back in 1992 was when USDOT originally identified major regional networks for developing higher speed rail corridors. And the Southeast Corridor was a component of that initiative. The Raleigh to Richmond line, or what we call RTR, or the S line, is a major segment in connecting the Northeast and Southeast, as I just mentioned. And one of the things that we're about is seeing that connection made so that we can bring success to the entire Southeast. The corridor really represents the only opportunity to create an additional capacity and connect the Southeast Northeast with regular high-performance rail service. And this is because the other north-south corridors extending in and through our state and out of our state are high-volume freight corridors. The Norfolk Southern Corridor extending from Greensboro north through Danville and into Virginia, as well as the CSX corridor extending south from Petersburg and into Rocky Mount, Selma, and into South Carolina are both high-volume freight corridors. And so we're looking at developing a corridor that can stand on its own, still support very important freight, but also support a new volume of passenger trains to tie these systems together. And there have been some important points along the way. Following the 1992 designation, our department leaned in the late 90s and went ahead with the Tier 1 NEPA effort and established a record decision with FRA in 2002. And then we immediately followed that with a Tier 2 document that took a long time to develop because it's 162 miles and about 80 miles of roadway. We established that as a record decision. That was a major decision point, major component of our program in ensuring that we had a path forward. On the heels of that, we won a grant in 2020 through the CRISI program, $48 million that would support the corridor acquisition in North Carolina from CSX. And in 2022, ourselves, along with VPRA, submitted and won a $58 million CRISI grant for the survey and PE of the entire corridor from Raleigh to Richmond. That includes 30% engineering on real-world survey coordinates and control, so you can actually build from this engineering. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits of this project regionally. As you can see on the map, we have significant population centers that are served along the core route of the S-Line and Southeast Corridor. 20 million today between us and our partners in Virginia. And it's expected to grow to 25 million by 2040. So what we're looking at is creating a corridor with additional capacity and the ability to save over an hour in travel time connecting our two states. It becomes the backbone of a regional multimodal corridor, meaning that the rail system can expedite people from locality to locality, city center, urban and rural centers, where they can get on other forms of transit to their final destination. The link on this route is critical to the further expanding the North Carolina passenger rail system, because this is where you get the volume of passengers in the network that allow folks in the growing system to get where they need to get going, more than just in North Carolina, but around the Southeast. It also provides freight rail network resiliency in providing another route for trains versus the CSX A-line route, if in case there's a major maintenance activity or a natural disaster or something of that nature. Obviously, environmental benefits flow with using rail or leaning into rail more just due to its efficiencies. And another important point is expanding service to disadvantaged and underserved regions, specifically those areas north of the Triangle region and south of Petersburg in this particular area. So just a few additional points. We're looking at a 110-mile-an-hour corridor to reduce the travel times. We're looking at connecting manufacturing and job centers to population centers, creating prospects for new industry and new community amenities, enhancing and creating economic opportunities in rural communities, both through the opportunities that would come with mobility hubs or stations, as well as enhanced access for freight, additional freight capacity, as I mentioned, and an equitable transportation option. Here in our state, the governor has an initiative under Executive Orders 80 and 246 to transform North Carolina's economy to a clean, equitable economy. And we can do this by attracting riders to rail from the highway network, and I dare say aviation. Important note here is that analysis shows that diverted cars along with buses and air trips would reduce air emissions by 3.6 billion metric tons of carbon, 10 million metric tons of NOx, and 237 metric tons of particulate matter. A significant emissions reduction by establishing this corridor. We maximize safety. We're looking at a fully grade separated corridor. We're looking at opportunities for transit-oriented development, and of course, a shorter route overall for this core route for intercity passenger rail service. Number of activities are underway on the corridor. I mentioned corridor acquisition. That is underway and advancing very well. We're also working on service development with our partners. Corridor photogrammetry and survey has already started. We did that even in advance of applying for the grant to make sure that we were in a good position to receive the grant from the engineering money. We've got broad community engagement ongoing. I'll go into that a little bit more later in the presentation. And of course, I mentioned the 30% engineering grant was one. We have 162 miles of railroad design and 82 miles of roadway design involved in that PE opportunity. It's a major opportunity for the industry. And we're planning for future grants and identifying matching funds to do that. A little bit on service development. So this is the corridor as it exists today. And what I really wanted to demonstrate is we've got two relatively high volume systems, one between Raleigh and Charlotte, and then one in the Virginia corridors between the Hampton Roads, Richmond area, and DC. Between those two corridors, there's really only one state-supported train, the Carolinian, which is a very successful train, but doesn't appropriately tie together those two networks. As we move into the development period of this program, by 26, Virginia will be adding additional service from Richmond North, and we will be looking at adding our Charlotte Gateway Station. Charlotte Gateway Station, moving it uptown, our early estimates demonstrate that we'll have at least a 17% increase in ridership and probably higher. So that one element there will be a real juice towards the use of the passenger rail service. By 2030, we're targeting having a completed connection between Petersburg and Raleigh over the new S line. And that is a game-changing connection, because what that does is, for the first time, it really ties those two systems together with high-frequency service on an improved network. And then by 2040, with some additional projects, mostly in Virginia, between Richmond and Petersburg, and perhaps Richmond North to DC, we will look at an expanded through service over that network to provide folks even more opportunities to use the rail service. Well, we're building one of the most technologically advanced railroads in the Southeast. We're really proud of this because we have a vision for not your grandfather's railroad, but the railroad of the future. 110-mile-per-hour passenger railroad on day one. Fully grade separated is what's in the record of decision. Obviously, that will be looked at more closely as we more fully develop the corridor, but the goal is grade separation. A concrete tie track network that will handle higher speeds and hold line and grade better than the wood tie network that we currently have today. High-speed switches, we'll be using switches that we've developed through our Piedmont Improvement Program for smooth ride quality and higher speed diverging moves. High-level platforms at stations to allow for level boarding. Freight bypass tracks around those high-level platforms. Positive train control, obviously, as a requirement for the system that will both support the passenger rail network and increased freight services over the line, and advanced signal systems. This is just a graphic showing one of the sections along the corridor where we're looking at improvements. This is from the ROD, or the final EIS documents. This shows a major realignment in the Wake Forest area and a grade separation of Rogers Road. This is just representative of some of the types of improvements that we're looking at in trying to smooth out and speed up the speed profile of the entire network. Now this is conceptual only, but this shows the where we're targeting the program schedule for developing specifically the Raleigh to Richmond corridor. Preliminary engineering, as I mentioned, is intended to go through 25. We'll have, and we are submitting for grants for final design and right-of-way acquisition, hopefully in the near future, that will support those activities through 27. Under a sequential or a parallel activity matrix with advanced construction methods, we would like to begin construction on some elements of the project in 25 with completion in 2030. It's very aggressive, but that is something that we're looking at right now. And then that would be Raleigh to Petersburg, which is to reconnect the line back to the A line at that location. And then there would be a follow-on analysis or program to reestablish Petersburg to Richmond and place that in service as well by 2040. We do have some current projects already underway on the corridor. These are primarily grade separations, but these are projects that we adopted and scored within our strategic transportation investments program, and were adopted into our state transportation improvement program. But they show a commitment to going ahead and already beginning the necessary work to bring a higher utility, higher speed network to the line. A little bit on our partner studies. We won a grant through FTA at about $900,000 a couple of years ago to do some early transit-oriented development studies in the communities all along the line. We wanted these communities to have a window into the opportunities of the line, and so really this was an opportunity to really engage on how their community could develop differently if the S line is an active asset. And we're proactively planning for this context-driven process. So it's a quarter-wide conversation, looking at funding, financing, transit operations within their communities, and then some components of local implementation that would be necessary for them to build their community around the projects. We have a number of partners up and down the line that have been very important to us in advancing this initiative, all the way from Sanford, which is south of Raleigh, up to Warren County, the very northern part of our state on the S line. We're very proud of these partnerships and the contributions they bring to the project. We also this year won a $3.4 million grant through the RAISE program to begin looking at mobility hubs for 7 communities listed there on the right-hand side. This is a further advancement, kind of building upon the TOD analysis, where we are working with these communities to look at not just a train station, but a location within their town or city that makes sense for connecting these modes of transportation, so that you can set yourself up for a coordinated and consolidated network, and not one that's separated within their community. And we're very excited to be working with these communities on that program. I also wanted to mention partnerships across the Southeast. These are very important partnerships to us through the Southeast Corridor Commission. There are 6 states in the District of Columbia that are involved with the Southeast Corridor Commission. This was established to coordinate high-performance rail system developed south of DC, and not just passenger rail, but also coordinate on freight initiatives and initiatives in general. Our Deputy Secretary for Multimodal Transportation, Julie White, is the chair of that committee, of the commission, and Vice Chair is Jennifer DeBrule from Virginia DRPT. Meg Perkle, who's the Chief Engineer at GDOT, is the Secretary, and we're supported by the other folks you see there on the screen as well with the other DOTs. again, real important partnerships, important conversations that we have across state lines in developing this corridor. And we've been working real well together on strategies for establishing and developing the Southeast network. We also value our consulting and contracting industry greatly. These entities will be incredibly important to pulling off the large project that the S-Line, the Raleigh to Richmond project will be. And so we actually had an industry day meeting on August 25th in Wake Forest. Great participation from the industry. They got to hear about the project and ask questions, and also hear about, some of the initiatives that we have in wanting to see small and disadvantaged business enterprises participate in this effort. So making sure that it's available to a wide cross section of different entities. I mentioned earlier that we're preparing for grant opportunities. We've got the 30% engineering funding for the Raleigh to Richmond program, the entirety from Raleigh to Richmond, and but we're not resting there. The aggressive schedule requires us to look at opportunities as they come available, and so we're looking at those opportunities for right-of-way, final design, and construction to meet a relatively aggressive schedule. One of the challenges in working with grant programs is you don't know how much you're going to get. And so we're developing a phased implementation plan that can flex based upon the available funding or the funding received within grant programs. And we're working closely with partners, both internally and externally, on matching funds to support those grant applications. So I'll go over a little bit on the North Carolina funding sources for railroad projects, just for those that are not familiar with it. So in 2013, we passed the General Assembly in North Carolina passed a law called Strategic Transportation Investments, and for the first time in North Carolina history, that opened up state funding, state transportation funds, to railroad projects for funding, specifically projects on class one freight systems and passenger rail projects. Freight projects are eligible for the highest tier of funding, which is also the largest pot of funding, and then passenger projects are eligible at the lower levels of funding, or at the regional and division tiers. Short lines are not eligible under that program, but that brings me to the next block, which is our Freight Rail and Rail Crossing Improvement Fund. This program is our greatest source for supporting the statewide short line network, where they can receive funding for infrastructure on their networks that will support increased car loads, higher axle loads, opportunities to increase business and capacity to meet those things, as well as supporting crossing improvements, rail crossing improvements, safety improvements, a wide variety of improvements there, including grade separation, rail industrial access for individual customers seeking access to the rail network, the preservation of rail corridors, acquisition of rail corridors, and then, as I mentioned, short line infrastructure. And then the real big picture is the federal funding for rail projects, where there's significantly more funding under the IIJA than there ever has been in history. Obviously, these programs require state and local funding as leverage, but we have been successful in leveraging our STI, or STIP program, in going after these investments, and some components of the FRIXI program in going after these investments. And going forward, we'll be leaning on those programs, as well as working with other state and partner sources to advance the project. Most folks know that at the federal level, there is no formula funding for rail projects. Everything is a discretionary grant. So that does mean that you have to compete. And Fortunately, the projects, the Raleigh to Richmond project is a project of significance. It competes very well, and there's significant opportunity there. Many of you may have seen this slide about, this just represents sort of the scale of the funding that we're seeing under the new federal programs. Certainly our hope here at North Carolina DOT that even beyond IJA and future surface transportation authorizations, we'll see this level of funding or more for rail as we try to rebalance the transportation equation. And many have also been monitoring this array of NOFOs or funding announcements as they've come out. There's a number of active grants. So we're looking at and pursuing all these different opportunities that are eligible for the program to advance the project. So our next steps are obviously to prepare. We are now preparing and will be preparing future grant applications to advance the project beyond the 30% engineering. We're going to continue our strong coordination with our stakeholders and partners, BPRA, Amtrak, the freight railroads, the communities, other stakeholders in the industry. I'm under a strong directive to expedite Raleigh to Richmond, the PE program, as fast as possible, so we can really start to see the real scope and estimates come forward from that effort. And we'll continue to look at opportunities to accelerate delivery of the Raleigh to Richmond corridor and expand rail services up the corridor. And at the same time, we're continuing to study additional corridors throughout our state for future rail services. The S-Line, as I mentioned earlier, provides a tremendous opportunity to provide the volume of passengers needed to support a statewide rail network. So we are really looking at it as a connected system and as a statewide issue, a statewide program, a statewide project. And a little bit on that real quick, we have a few active studies going on right now to evaluate service feasibility on these new routes, to identify route options, which corridors make sense, identify infrastructure improvements or needs on those segments, estimate the capital and operating costs for planning purposes for those particular routes. Looking at ridership estimates to see where we can find success there. The studies and analysis will include important considerations for the next steps, including freight railroad coordination, which is absolutely critically important as we consider these new routes going forward. One of the things that there is, we are trying to build networks on corridors that are not the most strategic for the railroads, but using underutilized or light density lines to do that. The studies will outline next steps for NEPA evaluation. Many are following the Federal Railroad Administration's Corridor ID application process, and these studies will support that. And notably, these studies include currently for us Asheville to Salisbury in the western part of the state, Wilmington to Raleigh in the southeastern part, and Raleigh to Greenville. Just an image here real quick on our southeast North Carolina study. This is a route that looks at a fairly direct route between Raleigh and Wilmington via Goldsboro, utilizing NCRR and CSX assets, as well as an NCDOT asset between Wallace and Castle Hayne there in the bottom right. And then there's a more circuitous route that's being evaluated that follows higher density freight corridors between Selma and Fayetteville and Point South and then east. That's a much longer route, but that is something that's being evaluated on that project there. And then we're also have a lot of interest from Western North Carolina on a study that we're evaluating between Salisbury and Asheville, working with the communities there. This would follow currently a Norfolk Southern lighter density line over the mountains. Very pretty route, but a lot of interest in connecting the rural and urban communities in between Salisbury and Asheville as well. And that brings me to the end of my presentation, Barry. And I'd be happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Jason. If you want to stop sharing your screen, I'll set it.
I can do that.
Expand this all. Okay. All right. The first question for the S line: will a companion trail be part of this project? I know that was in, I think the record of decision back in 2017 was to have a trail, a bike trail near or along the alignment.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's the East Coast Greenway, which is sort of what was is contemplated to follow the S line, was an important part of the planning of this project. And the actual improvements for that trail were not actually adopted into the EIS or the record of decision for the actual rail improvement, but a separate document was done for that trail specifically. I think this is an important coordination point, obviously, going forward. You know, as we seek to really look at multimodal solutions, you know, for this new corridor. Obviously, we value the rail network connecting to local and regional trail networks as a means of connectivity in the overall transportation system.
Absolutely. Thank you. Y'all's vision is very exciting, kind of getting out of just the urban corridor and extending out to Asheville and to the eastern side as well. How many North Carolinians would that connect? That's always a big thing we like to talk about, is how many Virginians are near rail stations. And your vision seems to really kind of connect a lot of your population.
That's right. I don't have an exact number, but I can tell you hundreds of thousands of North Carolina citizens, you know, live along those corridors that we're looking at, you know, extending to, and they represent a very important service region for connectivity, I think, to the overall rail network on both the Western studies and the Eastern studies.
Excellent. Do you see any trains to from North Carolina to Hampton Roads? That's one of the more frequent questions we get as well, is when the S line is fully developed, what are the opportunities to have a direct route from Norfolk or Hampton or Newport News down to Raleigh or Charlotte?
That also is an excellent question. We certainly are monitoring that. What I will say is it does feel like there's a very good Hampton Roads, you know, to North Carolina market. The exact service, you know, development is something that we're working on, you know, to figure out how we serve those markets. Yeah. But connectivity along the network and providing an efficient operation or efficient train service for folks to get from the Tidewater region in North Carolina is something we're looking at as part of the service development for sure. There might be a train connection, or there might be a direct service. But those are things that we're evaluating and looking through. Okay.
And one of our friends at Apple asked a question. Have you had any conversations as part of the S line stakeholder outreach with Apple and with some of the other stakeholders on station locations or facilities along that line as the construction advances and the plans advance?
Well, I would say that is certainly something we would like to do. I'm not sure if there's been a specific outreach on that, but the business community is very important to us. And we've been working with you know, some associations that represent the business community with this effort. The Regional Transportation Alliance here in the Triangle region is one of them. We definitely want to hear about the interests of the business community as we further develop this corridor. So that's something we're very open to.
Okay, thank you. So Rafi, please reach out to Jason. He's the gentleman who asked the question. Do you all anticipate Amtrak being the operator, or are you all thinking about other operators as part of it? And I guess kind of in addition to that, what was kind of the speed cap of 110 on the S line? Is there a possibility for 125 or future if it allows, if the train sets allow?
Okay, so the first question was Amtrak. Obviously, they're a critically important partner in developing this corridor. They have a long-standing relationship with Virginia in services there. And we have a very long relationship with them. We've been working with Amtrak on state-supported services now for over 30 years, nearly 40 years, and have a very good relationship. I think, one of the things that we're looking at is, we want to make sure that we have a contiguous and a system. We want to have continuity, and so Amtrak is a logical operator because of the services they will be operating in Virginia. Their established relationship with freight railroads, their established sort of presence, in the Southeast. So that's probably as general as I can make it, but yes, Amtrak is a critically important partner towards looking at advancing this project.
Absolutely, and a single seat ride north of DC is always more beneficial than transfers.
It goes without saying.
Yeah. I guess the last question is, how can the folks on the town hall today and the advocacy community help both advance the S line as well as advance some of these other studies that you're doing? How can we support you in the work of the North Carolina DOT?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So, for the professionals, that are involved with their organizations, just, make sure that you get the word out about the importance of this project. As individual citizens, work within your communities, talk with your community leadership. If you've got, a connection to any of these networks or even ones that are interested in passenger rail, we'd love to, see that sort of discussions happening at a community level. We really find the communities to be incredibly important to advancing any transportation initiative. And it certainly has helped this effort to engage with them. But certainly working with your organizations, for awareness and to the extent that you want to be part of the effort, reach out to us and let us know your interest and how, and maybe there's something we can do to work together.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate you coming online and sharing the vision in North Carolina and all the exciting things happening. And as a Virginian, I'm excited about our partnership, our two states partnership, kind of leading, and sometimes it feels like pulling the Southeast a little bit forward into the vision, into the future. But thank you again. We greatly appreciate your willingness to share your vision and spending a little bit of time with us today.
Thank you, Danny. I appreciate it. And Barry, thank you too.
Absolutely. And I'm going to share a little bit of final business real quick. Thank you again to everyone who jumped on today. We are celebrating our 28th anniversary as an organization. So we're asking everybody to help us get to 280 supporters by considering making a tax-deductible contribution of $10. And you can donate at bhsr.com/donate. And also don't forget our next webinar. We have Jennifer Mitchell, the former director of Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, who's now the deputy administrator at the FRA. She's speaking at our next town hall on October 4th at noon. So please RSVP for that, and we'll send those links out. And thank you all again for joining us, and Jason for speaking to our group today. It was a great presentation and very informative, and everyone have a great Friday afternoon, and see you all soon. Thank you.